Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly.
The sports world is currently shaking from a seismic shockwave that nobody saw coming, but everyone secretly feared was inevitable. And the whispers surrounding Caitlin Clark have finally reached a boiling point. Rumors are exploding across the internet that the undisputed savior of modern women's basketball has officially reached her absolute breaking point and delivered a devastating ultimatum to the Indiana Fever franchise. After a rookie season that looked more like a grueling survival test than a victory lap, the narrative taking over the industry is that she is ready to pack her bags, walk away from the toxicity, and never look back. This massive shift in the story took a completely nuclear turn when the most vocal man in sports media, Stephen A. Smith, seemingly confirmed the darkest fears of Indiana fans everywhere. He didn't just hint at her frustration, but he painted a highly detailed picture of a generational talent who has been pushed to the absolute brink by a league that should be protecting her at all costs. But to truly understand why the biggest star on the planet is allegedly threatening to pull the plug on her entire WNBA situation, you have to look way beyond the viral logo threes and dive into the absolute nightmare she was dealing with behind closed doors. The reality of what was happening off the cameras was darker, more complex, and infinitely more exhausting than anyone realized. From the very second she stepped onto a professional court, an unprecedented target was painted on her back, but the real betrayal didn't come from her opponents. It came from the very organization that drafted her to be their ultimate savior. Throughout the entire agonizing season, fans watched in absolute disbelief as Caitlin was hip-checked, blindsided, and violently targeted by players who clearly had a massive chip on their shoulders. Everyone remembers the infamous cheap shot from Chennedy Carter that sparked a massive national outrage. The ball wasn't even in play, yet Carter went out of her way to deliver a shoulder check that sent the rookie sprawling to the hardwood. That singular moment was supposed to be a wake-up call for the league, but it was really just the tip of the iceberg. Fast forward to the intense pressure cooker of the playoffs, and she takes a brutal, uncalled shot to the eye from DeJohnny Carrington that left her with a visible black eye in the most important game of her professional career. But the truly infuriating part wasn't the physical abuse itself. It was the deafening silence and complete lack of retaliatory action from her own teammates. In any other professional sports league on the planet, if you lay a single aggressive finger on the franchise player, or an enforcer is immediately in your face, making absolutely sure it never happens again. When Michael Jordan was getting battered by the Pistons, the Bulls brought in muscle. When Wayne Gretzky was on the ice, he had a dedicated bodyguard in skates. Instead, Caitlin was left picking herself up off the hardwood time and time again, while the Indiana Fever roster seemingly looked the other way, or offered half-hearted assistance. And it was a glaring lack of solidarity that completely infuriated basketball purists and casual fans alike. But someone with a massive, unavoidable microphone was watching every single second of this blatant mistreatment, and he was absolutely livid about the optics. Stephen A. Smith has never been one to bite his tongue, but his recent tirades regarding the Caitlin Clark situation have reached a completely different stratosphere of intensity. He went on national television and practically confirmed that the internal dynamics within the WNBA and the Fever were rotting from the inside out due to rampant, unfiltered jealousy. He aggressively called out the veteran players, the opposing coaches, and the league officials, demanding to know why the one single player who was flying them from commercial airports to private charters and tripling their television ratings was being treated like public enemy number one. Stephen A., I made it crystal clear that Caitlin is acutely aware of the animosity, and more importantly, she is completely exhausted by the daily mental gymnastics required to navigate it. He exposed the incredibly uncomfortable truth that while players were forcing smiles for the cameras and offering generic PR statements, there was a deeply rooted resentment over her unprecedented shoe deals, her massive corporate endorsements, and the sheer volume of media attention she commanded without even trying. According to the relentless commentary from Smith, this toxic, hyper-competitive environment has drained the pure joy out of the game for her, morphing what should have been a historic, celebratory rookie campaign into a daily mental and physical grind. But the physical beatings and the petty jealousy from opposing locker rooms were only half the battle she was fighting. The real disaster was brewing right on the Indiana Fever sidelines, so orchestrated by a front office and coaching staff that seemed entirely out of their depth from day one. Head coach Christy Sides became the target of relentless, entirely justified criticism all season long for coaching decisions that completely baffled seasoned basketball experts. From bizarre offensive schemes that inexplicably took the basketball out of Caitlin's hands during crucial possessions, to baffling benchings during critical stretches of incredibly tight games, the coaching strategy looked less like a winning formula and more like a massive, stubborn ego trip. Millions of fans watched their television screens in utter frustration as Caitlin, arguably the greatest offensive engine in the history of college basketball, was repeatedly forced to run stagnant, outdated plays that completely neutralized her legendary passing vision and deep-range shooting threat. Rumors began swirling rapidly throughout the summer that the relationship between the rookie phenomenon and her head coach was quietly fracturing beyond repair. How could a professional franchise draft a once-in-a-lifetime talent, a player who literally reinvented the geometry of the basketball court at Iowa, and fundamentally fail to build a system or a protective roster around her? It was gross negligence at the highest possible level of professional sports, and it reportedly pushed Caitlin to realize that her legendary potential was being actively sabotaged by sheer incompetence. The general manager, Lynn Dunn, also faced intense scrutiny for failing to surround her new star with the necessary veteran enforcers and floor spacers required to maximize her talents. Instead of a meticulously crafted roster designed to run the floor and shoot the lights out, Caitlin was handed a disjointed group of players who fundamentally clashed with her fast-paced, high IQ style of basketball. And the tension on the bench was just a brief preview of the icy Cold War happening completely out of the public eye. Behind the locked doors of the Fever locker room, the atmosphere was allegedly incredibly thick, with unspoken tension and awkward interactions. You have to imagine the bizarre, highly volatile dynamic of an entire roster of professional women, many of whom have grinded in the shadows for years for incredibly low pay, suddenly being thrust into a blinding, relentless global spotlight solely because of one 22-year-old rookie. Every single post-game press conference felt like a dangerous tightrope walk, with veteran teammates carefully choosing their words to avoid praising her too much, or conversely, accidentally letting their true, frustrated feelings slip out to a ravenous media. There were countless uncomfortable moments captured by eagle-eyed fans where body language told a totally different, a much darker story than the PR-approved quotes being fed to reporters. Subtle eye rolls, intentionally ignored high fives on the bench, and cryptic social media posts from players' family members created a massive, tangled web of speculation that Caitlin was essentially an island within her own organization. For example, when family members of certain Fever players were caught liking highly critical tweets about Caitlin's defense or turnover rate, it sent shockwaves through the fan base and highlighted the massive internal divide. she was carrying the crushing, unimaginable weight of an entire league's financial future squarely on her shoulders, all while trying to navigate a locker room that felt more like a hostile corporate work environment than a unified championship-contending team. When you combine the physical exhaustion of playing the hardest, the most compressed schedule in the league with the mental exhaustion of playing alongside people who allegedly resent your mere existence, something is inevitably bound to snap. The human mind can only take so much pressure before the fundamental desire to escape takes over completely. And just when the Indiana Fever executives thought they had her locked down on a standard rookie contract, a massive, unprecedented opportunity materialized out of thin air to change the entire landscape of her career. Enter the Unrivaled League, a brand-new, highly funded 3-on-3 basketball venture spearheaded by WNBA heavyweights Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier. While the WNBA was publicly paying their absolute biggest draw a famously meager rookie salary of around $76,000, Unrivaled was preparing to completely flip the script on women's sports compensation. Rumors exploded across financial and sports sectors that this new league was preparing to offer Caitlin a staggering Lionel Messi-like contract worth millions of dollars, complete with massive equity in the business itself and total unfiltered control over her personal brand and marketing. This wasn't just a slight pay bump or a nice off-season bonus. It was generational wealth and unprecedented executive power being handed to her on a silver platter. The format of the league, a set in Miami during the WNBA offseason, offered a much shorter schedule, fewer physical beatings, and a significantly more player-friendly environment. Furthermore, massive European powerhouses are always lurking in the shadows with open checkbooks, historically willing to pay high seven figures for just a few months of an elite American player's time. The terrifying financial reality hit the Indiana front office like an unstoppable freight train. Caitlin Clark absolutely does not need the WNBA or the Indiana Fever to be a millionaire, but the WNBA desperately, fundamentally needs Caitlin Clark to survive and grow. The leverage she suddenly possessed was absolute, and according to the explosive narratives relentlessly pushed by analysts like Stephen A. Smith, she is fully prepared to use every single ounce of it to force a massive paradigm shift. But money wasn't the only thing driving this sudden shift in power, or the cultural exhaustion was taking an even heavier toll. The daily media circus surrounding her every single breath had reached a level of toxicity that bordered on dangerous and psychologically draining. Every single day, major television networks manufactured forced rivalries, twisting every minor on-court interaction into a massive racial, political, or cultural debate that Caitlin never once asked to be a part of. The endless, exhausting comparisons to Angel Reese, the highly polarizing debates over her perceived privilege, and the constant, ruthless dissection of her character turned a game she genuinely loved into a relentless, exhausting political battleground. News anchors who had never watched a single quarter of women's basketball in their entire lives were suddenly using her name to push their own specific network agendas. She explicitly stated multiple times in press conferences that she just wanted to play basketball and make her teammates better. But the unstoppable sports media machine absolutely refused to let her exist simply as an athlete. She was forcefully appointed to be a spokesperson, a cultural savior, and a universal punching bag, all at the exact same time. It is a terrifying level of pressure that has broken seasoned veteran athletes in the past, let alone a 22-year-old rookie who was fresh out of a protected college environment. The sheer volume of microphones shoved in her face, the asking her to answer for the behavior of her fans, the comments of podcasters, or the historical inequities of the WNBA was a burden no rookie has ever been forced to carry. When the Fever were finally eliminated from the playoffs by the Connecticut Sun, an incredibly telling moment occurred. As she walked off the court for the final time in her rookie season, she didn't look entirely heartbroken or devastated. She looked incredibly, undeniably relieved. And the weight of the world was momentarily lifted. During her final exit interview, she jokingly talked about putting away her basketball for a while and picking up her golf clubs. But many plugged-in insiders read that casual comment as a highly calculated, terrifying warning shot to the league. She was publicly, subtly declaring that she was taking her life back, stepping entirely out of the toxic media circus, and re-evaluating her entire professional future on her own specific terms. And that brings us directly to the brutal ultimatum that currently has the entire basketball world holding its collective breath in pure suspense. The dramatic phrase, "I'm leaving forever," might sound like wild, clickbait internet speculation at first glance. But when you carefully piece together the complex puzzle laid out by insiders and confirmed by Stephen A. Smith's relentless, highly sourced commentary, a very clear, undeniable picture emerges. Caitlin holds the ultimate, an unbeatable trump card in this high-stakes game of professional poker. She can effortlessly demand a trade right now, refusing to step one single foot on the court for Indiana unless they completely gut the coaching staff, overhaul the incompetent front office, and immediately bring in players who will actually protect her physically and willingly run her fast-paced system. She has the unprecedented power to point at Christie's sides and simply say, "It's her or me," and the franchise would have absolutely no choice but to comply. Or, even more terrifying for the league's television executives, she could just walk away entirely for a season to prove a massive point. She could take the massive multi-million-dollar bag from the unrivaled league, sign a massive, historic extension with Nike, play a few highly publicized exhibition games overseas, and leave the WNBA scrambling in an absolute panic to explain to their sponsors why television networks are suddenly pulling their massive broadcasting deals. The ratings for the WNBA playoffs plummeted the absolute second the Indiana Fever were eliminated, dropping by staggering percentages and proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the millions of newly acquired fans weren't tuning in out of a newfound love for the league. They were tuning in exclusively, entirely for her. The Clarkonomics effect is so profoundly real that local businesses in opposing WNBA cities reported massive spikes in revenue purely because the Fever were in town for one single night. If she actually follows through on this underlying threat and leaves the franchise, the financial devastation for the Fever, their local economy, and the entire WNBA ecosystem would be absolutely catastrophic. The reality of the situation is that the WNBA spent a highly publicized season looking a massive golden gift horse directly in the mouth. They allowed their absolute most valuable asset to be battered, bruised, isolated, and alienated, while prominent, entirely correct voices like Stephen A. Smith screamed from the mountaintops that they were historically fumbling the biggest financial and cultural